One of the bottommost top ones that you should have is shelter or a home. So you need to think about your needs as a person. So you need a home, but do you want a bigger home? Like, you might want a bigger home, but you might not be able to financially afford a bigger home. And then we go into the financial and emotional states. If you're not in a financially good state, obviously you're not going to need a home. If you're not in an emotionally good state, obviously you don't need a home either. And you don't need to own a home. In your area of residence, I live in a rural town at home, so a lot of the rural areas don't have that many apartments to rent. So obviously there's a lot of buying and owning of homes there. But if you live in somewhere that's like New York, Chicago, there's a lot of renting there because there's not a lot of homes that you can own. And then the number of family members that you have, if you're starting off with a really low family, you might want to just rent a place because you never know how quick your family is going to develop. And if that space becomes smaller, it might be harder to get out of it. And then your age, college students like us, we don't really need to be buying a home at this point in time. And then renting a home, like I said, college students, we really don't need to be buying a home right now. Most of us are in debt. We don't really have the financial stability to be buying a home right now. And then smaller families, they're just growing. Like I said before, they're growing. They don't know when their family's going to develop even further. They're starting out their life, so renting is usually a better option for them. And when you have limited money, you can't afford the mortgages and everything that comes around, the insurance taxes, everything that comes with the house. And then moving around, with renting a home, you can easily get out of your lease a lot easier. Usually they're like 9.5, 12 month leases, so you can get out of them easier compared to a house. It takes a lot more time to sell it. And some pros of renting are the repairs. You usually don't have to take care of your repairs. Usually the person who owns the building takes care of the repairs yourself, and you can move easily. 9.5 to 12 month leases usually. And a lot of extras are involved with renting. Usually in an apartment you get maybe like a pool and exercise room, maybe some basketball equipment, volleyball, stuff like that. And a con is the payment rising. I know, for example, Copper Beach just raised their rates last year, so if you lived there the year before, you're getting higher rates this year. And you can't save anything on taxes, and you don't get any equity. And with owning a home, a lot of the families, when they're first starting off their lives, they're like, let's own a home now because it helps them. They feel like it starts out their life better and gets them a better fresh start. And then, obviously, like I said before, when you're in financial and an emotionally good state, that's when usually people are like, I'm ready to buy a home. And you need to budget your expenses for maintenance, taxes, and if something happens, like your washer breaks for the rainy day, you need money for that. So when you have money to pay for all those aspects, usually that's something, or that's a time when you can start buying a home. And this is a website that I found, if it loads, that shows you how you can avoid things when buying a home, like foreclosure. You can have financial aid assistance, and it shows you different things about buying a home and helps you basically prepare yourself for the process of buying one versus owning at the time. And I also found this video about 5 questions that you should ask yourself before buying a home. They're right here, but he's going to explain it, so I'll just start it.
You may have to look behind the PowerPoint presentation. It might not pop up.
Yep, there it is. Thank you.
Today, I'd like to address a question that I get asked on a regular basis, and that is, how do I know if I'm ready to go from renting to owning a home? You know, the fact is there's a lot that goes into that decision, but I think you can get a pretty good handle on your readiness to do this if you can answer yes to the 5 questions I'm going to cover today. The first question is your income secure? You know, every month when you own a home, you're going to have to make mortgage payments, and there's a lot of expenses associated with owning a home as well. To make sure that your home ownership doesn't put you in a bad financial situation, you want to make sure that your income is secure not only today, but for years and years into the future. The second question that you want to be able to say yes to is, do you plan to own the home for at least 5 years? Here's why this is important. When it comes time for you to sell the home at some point, you're going to have a lot of costs associated with doing that. Typically, it's best if you can take those costs out of the equity that you've built up in the house. Equity is just a difference between what is the house worth versus how much you owe on it. Since your initial years of making mortgage payments tend to go more to interest expense than paying down the debt, that means that your equity is often going to come from the increasing in the value of the house, or the house going up every year. Of course, the more years you have to work with, the better chance you have of the house going up, therefore the more equity you can potentially get. That's why it's important to have the house for at least 5 years in most cases. The third question you should be able to say yes to is, have you saved enough money for down payment and closing costs? Now, even if you get a loan that doesn't require you to do that, it's still important, I think, for a couple of reasons to set aside a down payment. The first would be that the larger the down payment you put down, the less likely you're going to have to pay private mortgage insurance on the mortgage. That private mortgage insurance is just an extra expense that you would have to pay that really doesn't go to doing any value creation or wealth building in your situation. So if you can avoid that, that's great. The second reason why a down payment is important, or being able to accumulate it, is if you can't save it up, if you haven't been able to do it, that could be a good indication, or a good red flag perhaps, that this might not be the right time for you to get into a house. Because when you get into that house, there's going to be an awful lot of extra expenses you don't currently have. Ideally, you'd like to be able to substitute that saving you did for the down payment for the extra money you're going to need to maintain the house going forward. The fourth question you should be able to say yes to is, have you saved enough money for a solid emergency fund? Here you're looking at 3 to 6 months worth of your committed expenses, ideally. And the idea is, even if you don't own a home, life always throws unexpected expenses at us. Owning a home just adds a whole new layer to that. So it's important you have a good emergency fund to cover those things so you don't have to go in debt. And finally, the fifth question I think you should be able to say yes to is, have you saved money for what I call make it mine costs? You know, whether it's, new window furnishings or new window treatments or furnishings, paint for the house, landscaping, those types of things. There's a lot of potential costs that you can incur when you get into a house initially. If you don't have the money set aside to do those things, you're either going to have to take it from your emergency fund, or you're going to have to go into debt to cover them. Neither of which is a good thing when you're just getting.
So as you can see, those are really important aspects to think about before buying a home. I'm actually going to go back to this slide. I forgot this link. I'm going to show you this link real quick. This is a tool that people can use in order to compare renting versus owning in a certain area. So you type in your zip code, such as BG, and it pops it up. And then you type in your desired home price and desired monthly cost of the rent. And, let's just say, and then I'm just making up these numbers, and then you calculate it, if it will calculate it. Down here,
It's a big difference.
Yeah. But, whatever you want to put in here, obviously, compared to what you have financially to spend, it will calculate it and show you a full-out mapping of what you would pay with each one, and it will show you which one would be the better cost for you at the time. And it has a graph right here, but it's not going to load. But if you want to check that out, that'll help you choose at the time, based on the money that you have, which one would be best for you. And some of the pros of owning is that you can build up your equity, and you can also build up the cost of the house. Just like the video said, after 5 years, you can start building up the cost of value of the house, and you get tax benefits as well. And some of the cons are that you have to pay for the repairs, and you have to do the repairs. There's nobody to do it for you unless you hire somebody to do it for you, or somebody in your family, such as my dad's good at working on things, so if you have somebody in your family that can do it for you as well. You have to pay taxes and insurance, and you're more tied down. It takes a lot more effort to sell a house than to get out of the lease. And this is just a simple question. Which of the following is not important to have before buying a home? Say you were going from this stage at college into buying a home. You're starting off your life. Would it be an emergency fund, a down payment, financial stability, a family, or a source of income?
4.
Yes. A family.
Okay, so I focused more on owning versus renting a vehicle, and I kind of broke it down into pros and cons. So for owning a vehicle, you don't have to worry about exceeding mileage limits like you would with a lease. And you can make it your own. If you're messy like I am, you don't have to worry about spilling coffee in your car and it leaving a stain or something. You could sell it at any time once it's paid off. However, any repairs or damage that's done to the car, you will have to make those, and you also have to worry about depreciation. Now, renting a vehicle is more short-term, like if you're going on a vacation or you were in a car accident and you need a temporary car. Though, like a negative thing to it is that it's expensive. It can cost someone about $45 to $65 a day to run a car, and it's also not a good solution for like everyday use. Okay, leasing a vehicle. You have lower monthly payments than owning one, and you can still lease if you have low credit. Down payments are smaller and depreciation is not a concern. However, there are higher insurance premiums and there are penalties for exceeding like the mileage limit you're given, and there are fees for wear and tear, as I mentioned earlier. And you will also always have car payments if you go that route. Okay, another kind of trend is like renting consumer products. Like a lot of people are starting to rent products such as like furniture, appliance, or even like tools. And it's called like rent to own, where you make payments and eventually you can like own it, but it's like without paying the full price up front. And it can be very convenient, and it will not affect your credit score. However, it can actually be more expensive in like the long run. I do have a video that kind of explains more of the negative side to it. It's slightly biased. You can tell these people favorite than okay.
Exit out of it and then it should probably like a different one.
Like get out of it.
Oh, right down there, the blue one.
Imagine going to an appliance or furniture store that charged twice as much, even 3 times as much, as any other store for the same stuff. Well, you'd think they wouldn't be in business long. But you'd be wrong. Because by breaking down the price into weekly installments, rent-to-own stores routinely collect at least double the retail price of virtually everything they sell. Of course, they're quick to point out the advantages of rent-to-own.
In rent-to-own, there's no credit check, no security deposit, no long-term obligation, and delivery, setup, and repairs are free. Plus, you can return the merchandise at any time for any reason.
Those are advantages, but many would argue they're not worth the higher price that comes with paying over time. Check out this example recently offered by Consumer Reports. They found a $612 Toshiba laptop at one rent-to-own store. Price, $38.99 a week for 48 weeks, for a total of $1,872, 3 times the price. That's like paying 311% interest. Better idea? Put $38.99 in the bank every week and you'd have the money in 16 weeks. That would save you $1,260 over rent-to-own.
At least if you do go the rent-to-own route, please don't just sign by the X. You gotta read this contract.
Read the fine print and ask questions. Ask about taxes, fees, late charges, and who's responsible if the stuff is lost or stolen. Bottom line, rent-to-own is no way to get ahead. Don't do it. But if you do, at least do it carefully. Want more ideas to save? We've got them waiting for you right here at MoneyTalksNews.com.
Okay, and just to wrap it up, there's no right or wrong answer between renting or owning. It just depends on your personal situation and what you can afford, and you just have to take the time to like weigh the pros and cons and figure that out, like which one's the best option for you. Okay.
And then our last side's just the work side.
Yeah.
Okay. Have any of you leased a car?
My brother just did.
Can I ask how old he is?
25, I think, almost.